Hello, welcome to Paint by Blunders. Today we're looking at a noise marine. Apologies for this video taking so long to come out. I've not been too well of late, which has just put painting on the back burner, and it's taken me ages to get this together. I'm fairly happy with the result. I really like the purple. A few things, admittedly there is a few more blunders in this video than I would normally like. For those of you that haven't seen any of my videos before, I tend to have this weird thing where I don't plan anything, which is terrible, but for me the creative sort of process, or the way I like painting, is I will see a model or a statue or prop, whatever, and I'll think in my head, this is what I want it to look like. I will grab a load of paints that I think will work, put them on the table, and then start painting it and hit record on the camera and hope it comes out, you know, relatively well. A few hits, a few misses, but you know, that's how it goes. But this one, I'd say this one, there's a few things I was a bit like, that doesn't work, but lots of things that do. But anyway, enough of me waffling. So there's no point in me lying about this. I tried to do some undershadow experimentation with dark plum and then royal purple over the top. It looks crap. In my opinion, I would just do the whole thing in royal purple. It's a fantastic purple and the one to use. Onto the golds. If you use GW paints, Retributor Armour would be the choice I would use. Fantastic paint, but I am well into my scale 75 metallics at the moment. Cult of Paint put me onto these and they are so good, and I'm going to be using Dwarven Gold. Fantastic little sparkly pigment goodness that makes them fantastic. Next up, Model Colour Black via Vallejo. You can use any black. In hindsight, I should probably use Contrast Black Legion because it is so good for this sort of thing. And I'm just going to do the sort of the tubing that I will be silver later. Just because it's easier to go over black, and I was doing the little exo padded suit that's underneath all the cool armor. I don't know what it's actually called, and I always stumble over what to call it in the videos, so if you know, please do comment below. And obviously we're trying to be very careful with this, because the problem I have with airbrushing the armor and stuff is if you make mistakes, it's harder to fix. So like I said at the start, I would just paint this whole thing in royal purple. Another metallic next. For all the silver parts, we are using Scale 75's Thrash Metal. Again, fantastic coverage, lovely tiny sparkly goodness, which makes it really pop, and I think it looks great against the purple. If you were using GW, I would just use, what's the mid-tone? Is it Runethang Steel? Probably something like that, or just Chainmail via Vallejo. This is probably slightly brighter, and I love it. It's great. Can't recommend Scale 75 Metallics enough. Next up, so anything that we're going to try and put contrast over, I will be using Bright Neutral Grey by Acrylic. And I've said this before on a couple of other videos, this is sort of my substitute for Grey Seer. I think it's got better coverage and is much brighter, and it takes a contrast paint very well. You will need a couple of coats of this, but it is fantastic. I highly recommend checking out. If you don't know Pro Acrylic, they are, in my opinion, one of the best miniature paint makers, with one of the worst lids. I will moan about that till the day I die. Just coming back in now with the black, because I forgot that he's holding this massive gun. Apparently I couldn't see that. So some of you may have noticed that the gun is now painted at the end, where the sort of the mouth is and the two shoulder pads. Essentially the memory card was full, so it didn't record that bit of footage, but it is just Pro Acrylic's bronze, and then yeah, it follows all the other steps that the rest of the metallics sort of take. So just to make our lives a little bit easier, I'm going to be using Striking Scorpion Green, the Citadel contrast paint, and I'm going to be using it for the cables. You could do the hair in this if you wanted, but that I'm going to use the cables. It's a fantastic contrast. It's really vibrant, super high pigment, and it just pops. And against the purple, I really liked it. And I'm using this straight out the pot. I'm not thinning it down at all, but I'm just trying to make sure I end my brush stroke where I want the heaviest amount of this paint to deposit, which is, you know, where the gun is or where the pipe starts. Next up, a thematic blue, and we're going to be using this on the loincloth and his lovely top knot. Watering this down by about, I don't know, 30%. And I hate saying this percentages, like 30%. I think I did two blobs on my wet palette of colour, and then one blob of medium. Gave it a zhuzh, thought that's good enough. Let's whack it on. Next up, Reekland Flesh Shade, and this is just going to go all over the gold. If anyone's seen any of my other videos, whenever I do this sort of orangey gold Retributor armour-esque armour, I always go over it with Reekland Flesh Shade. Something GW have done for the Stormcast since, you know, day one, and I really like how it looks. We are now going to be using Pro Acrylics Black Wash. You can just use Nuln Oil. The type of black wash is so non-important. It's just a case of toning down that silver and just giving it a bit of interest. Because after this, we are entering the world of oil washing. So, I'll be honest, I got this gambling purple wash, or oil paint I should say, not wash, and it inspired the entire video. I have no idea if this is going to look rubbish at this point or good, but I just thought, you know, sod it. The Emperor's Children lend itself to these sorts of colours. Trusty Payne's grey, just to knock it down if it's a bit abusive. I don't know if you can get it in this, but it's such a rich purple. It is stunning, but potentially a little bit too much for our purposes, so I do add in a little bit of Payne's grey. If you do not like using oils, at this point I would be using a little bit of Druchii Violet with the tiniest bit of Drakenhof Nightshade, and I mean a tiny amount of Drakenhof, and I would have that as a very, very, very watery uniform wash. I'm a huge fan of uniform washes. I feel it ties the whole model together. This admittedly is a bit of a risk because this uniform wash is bright purple. I think it looked okay. As I said at the start, I wasn't too sure whether to just strip the model and start again because I don't really do much planning. That's not how I like to paint. That kills the creativity for me. When I look at a model, I just think my head has an image of what I want it to look like, and I just try and achieve that on the fly. And I just press record on the camera while I do it. So I thinned it down quite a lot compared to my normal oil wash sort of mix. And I'm just starting off, you know, targeting where I want it to be, but eventually I just slap it all over the model. If you're trying to copy along, I would, in hindsight, I would avoid the loincloth and I would avoid his top knot. I redid his top knot afterwards because I caked it, and I hated it. I absolutely hated how it looked, so I did redo that later on. And then I'm coming back in after about half hour, 40 minutes. I do give it, you know, 30 seconds with the hairdryer as well, just to help it along by flashing off the mineral spirits. And I'm just coming in now with a brush on some of the more awkward areas and the classic makeup sponge with just a tiny amount of thinner on it, just to start wicking it away and leaving that lovely, you know, that saturated, you know, glaze almost that the oil wash is doing for me. Also, I know the whole oil wash thing, some people love, some people hate, some people are a bit like, I don't want to be involved in it, or I do want to be involved in it. Just let me know. I've been toying with the idea of doing like in what I would call like a oil washing for dummies, just like the essentials, a few tips and tricks, and how I would get started, and also the cost of it, because it seems quite expensive at first, but I think it's very cheap and cost effective. But yeah, let me know if you'd want to see something like that and I'll get it made. So with that done and wicked away, we're going to start looking at the sort of the cool finessey things now. Dirty down verdigris. Verdigris in a bottle. It's very good, very handy. You can use it from big things, small things, and it's just great. I'm just putting this on raw, dunking my brush in the bottle. You have to give it a damn good shake, but it is so effective, and you can just come in with a wet brush after, reactivate it, move it around, and you can create some really interesting effects, which is what I'm doing here, and I absolutely love it. I think it looks organic, it looks natural, just brilliant. I cannot recommend it enough. And you can apply it with sponge, brush. Oh, I don't know if you can do an airbrush though. Maybe I'll test that at some point this weekend. But if you don't have the dirty down stuff, you could easily just use the oxide paint from GW, or you could use, you know, just something of a similar tone, water it down and just use it as a wash and just wick it away as you go. I'm just going to come back in with the dry brushing of the Pro Acrylic Bronze, just to brighten it back up. So now we're coming back in with a bit of Nuln Oil or black wash, whatever one you prefer to use, and I'm just going around some of the bolts and some of the more interesting recesses, creases. There you go, a crease / recess on the gold, and just giving it a little bit of black. Another totally optional step, I used Green Stuff's World's green fluorescent paint. I wanted to just really make the cabling pop. This is the first time I've used this. I'm not really a fan, but I don't want to be too harsh on it because I could be using it completely wrong. But they always just go on like food colouring in PVA, if that makes sense. I really want to try the fluorescent inks, but I keep trying to get the AK fluorescent inks, but always out of stock. But who knows, maybe I'll get hold of them at some point. I see great results with the fluorescent paints when they go through an airbrush, but you know, I didn't want to do that. It doesn't look terrible, but I do find you have to do the really end your brush stroke where you want the most, you know, pigment deposited. Next up, we're going to use the Thrash Metal, the same as our base colour, and we're just going to pick out a few edges just to highlight that silver. Nothing major, you know, this isn't cabinet, this is interesting on the tabletop. I will probably start putting out a few videos that are a little bit more involved, just in case people want to see some techniques and how I would push a model a little bit further with a little bit more effort and sort of concentration. For the purple armour, I'm using Vallejo's Blue Violet, and I'm not making sure I'm doing every edge absolutely perfect. It's not what this is about. I'm just picking out a few interesting edges and just try and do it fairly sharp, but the odd little rough mark I think lends itself to a slightly grimier looking model. And once that's done, we're coming in with the bright neutral grey. We're going to be doing the loincloths. We're going to be using it to do little edge highlights on any of the black strapping and also the top knot, which at some point I repaint during this video. Coming back in with the Pro Acrylic Bright Neutral Grey, just to essentially edge highlight and just make the loincloth pop a little bit from after the washes. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be every sharp line. You can, stagger it, give it a bit of texture, stipple it. It will all work and it will all look fine. So now we're going to tackle the sort of canister on the gun. AK Interactive's deep green and Pro Acrylics bright yellow green. Very impressed with the deep green. That is our base, and then we're just going to be adding a small amount of the Pro Acrylic and then just narrowing that band of green to sort of follow that curved shape until eventually it's just going to be Pro Acrylics bright yellow green, and we're just going to be doing a very fine line. After that, it's just a case of dotting the eyes. All I do for that is a little bit of striking scorpion green contrast and a tiny white dot for a lens. So after that's done, I just use AK Interactive's concrete. I use this quite a lot as just like a generic basing paste. There's probably better, more cost-effective ones, but it's on the desk, so I use it just because it's a nice light grey, so you can wash it or paint it, and then I just slap in a load of pigment powders and call it done to whatever colour lends itself to the model and the aesthetic of the world that I'm trying to put them in. I also always do the thing where I add a little bit of medium or fixer to almost turn it into a paste, or a wash, not a paste, for like the bottom of the boots, the loinclothy bits, any capes if they had them that are draping. Then after that, it's just a black rim on the base, and I'm calling it done. Apologies again, I've been so ill and I wanted to get this video out, so there's way more mistakes in it that I would normally allow, even for paint by blunders. But honestly, I really appreciate anyone who's checked this out and for being a bit patient with me on this one. Chances are I'll look at this guy, dunk him in bio strip, and then do another video at some point. But that is him for now. I think he looks pretty cool. Yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you on a improved Paint by Blunders video in the future.